Hey, how you doing, girl? So I want to talk to you about some fatherly advice I have about using the thought sandwich technique. And this is my own technique. And this is when and how you use it. It has to do with the thoughts that you have when you notice that the thoughts that you have in your mind are ridiculous. And this happens very often. Have you ever, in your own inner voice, have you ever heard your inner voice say things like, I'm ugly, or I'm stupid, or my life is terrible, or make exaggerated claims about what other people are thinking in situations when there is no way for you to know what other people are thinking? I call all of these thoughts ridiculous. And it happens all the time. Like, I'm a handsome man, and sometimes I'll say that I'm fat, which is a ridiculous thought. Sometimes I'll say I'm stupid or an idiot, and I'll say these statements to myself using my inner voice. And of course, they are ridiculous because I've been an engineer for almost 22 years. I have a bachelor's degree in physics. I am definitely not an idiot. And sometimes I'll talk about my life in terms that are less than glowing. I'll say my life is a wreck or whatever. So these, of course, are ridiculous thoughts. And I know you have them too. All human beings have them. And this is a very common problem. And the question becomes, what next? How seriously do you take these thoughts? Now, cognitive behavioral therapy is a technique that a lot of psychotherapists use to sort of help people have thoughts that make more sense, right? Have thoughts that are less ridiculous. Now, this might be a cognitive behavioral therapy technique, but it's my own technique that I use. It's called the sandwich technique, and I'm using the idea of a sandwich because it's a metaphor that's easy to understand. And the point I want to bring across when I say the sandwich technique is this idea of layers, right? So, layering. Now, here's the idea of the sandwich, the thought sandwich. The metaphor is that there's a soggy bun at the bottom of the sandwich. There's the nutritious inner part, and then there's the top bun, which is a whole lot better than the bottom bun beneath it. Buns get soggy on the lower bun because all the meat juice and the other juices like ketchup or something, they get soaked up into that meaty, spongy bun. So here's the idea of the sandwich metaphor in the thought sandwich technique. What I'm suggesting is that the lowest level of thinking is these judgments that you tell yourself, like I'm fat, or I'm miserable, or this person is horrible, that other person's horrible, whatever. These are statements that we make to ourselves in our inner voice. I'm going to call this the lowest layer of thinking. And it's a problem. If a person takes these thoughts seriously. For example, some of these thoughts might be violent if people are really angry. And or there might be, they might include thoughts of self-harm or harming others. And so, in fact, the soggy lowest layer of thinking is very challenging and can be very problematic, especially for people who take these thoughts seriously. Now, I mentioned earlier, these thoughts are ridiculous. They don't make any sense. They often have what I call no cognitive content. And so, but I think they do have some content, and here's what it is. Quite often, behind these ideas, this lowest common denominator of thinking, the lower bun, these ideas give you indicators about what your needs are, right? If your needs are unmet, you'll feel disappointment, and you'll end up making judgments that are ridiculous, But what those judgments can do is they can give you insight into the next higher layer. And this higher layer is from the sandwich metaphor. It's the layer where there's the meat and the tomatoes and the lettuce, right? This is nutrient dense food. And the idea here in this second layer is that your needs are important, right? If I say to myself I'm fat, what I might be saying from a needs perspective is that I want to feel like I've got a healthy lifestyle. I notice the construction. I want to feel, or I want to have a healthy lifestyle. These are I wants, I wishes, I need. These are desires. These are desires that we have, needs we have to be happy. And we naturally seek to meet those needs. And I guess our brain, as simple as it is, makes these judgments at the lowest layer of thinking. These judgments are just, we're grabbing at straws, saying what we hate, what we don't hate about ourselves and others. And really, what those statements are just sort of pay attention to the intention behind those thoughts. Our brain is really trying to help us and protect us. Our brain is trying to get us to act, maybe to motivate us. When my brain says, I'm fat, really what that is my brain asking myself to motivate my behavior for more healthy lifestyle choices. So me saying I'm fat is the ridiculous thought that doesn't make any sense, that pretty much I should ignore from a literal standpoint, because naturally, clearly, I'm not fat. That's the ridiculous part of the statement. The next layer is the nutritive part. That's understanding the needs. For me, for that statement, it would be, I have a desire to be more intentional about adopting healthful behaviors. Do you see how that's a need? I want to adopt more healthful behaviors. I wish to adopt more healthful behaviors. I dream about adopting more healthful behaviors. That's the second layer, the layer that talks about needs, wishes, dreams. And that is the nutrition. You want that. You want to get there to that second level. And then the top level, right? This is the nice fresh bun on top. This is the good bread. This is what makes it all worthwhile in your sandwich metaphor. And the next layer is going from what you need and want to the values that you will commit to act. So a value is something that you act to gain or keep. And basically what the point here is to translate your needs into actions where you act in conformance to your values. For example, one of the values I have is education, learning. I also have a value in terms of self-care. That's an important value of mine. So I go from a point of needs. That is, I wish that I had more healthful behaviors. And then the next level is acting in ways that are consistent with my values. And so what that might mean is, from a health standpoint, I might look at clinical studies on the internet to find what behaviors reduce mortality. So I'm using my mind, my intellectual powers. These are values that I have, and I'm going to act in ways that are consistent with my values. That value of self-care, that's right. I will pursue actions in an orderly way that focus on self-care, and I'll use my mind, my intellectual abilities to do that. So that's the sandwich. So in fact, it happens for me very quickly now. I use the sandwich technique all the time. it turns out that almost every one of my thoughts that I have falls in this lower layer. It's just the initial thought. It's completely ridiculous. I might say something like, I hate myself or whatever. That really is just my mind trying to motivate me and to act in a way that is to my benefit. And what I'll do is I'll abstract that ridiculous thought into what my needs might be. And then I'll abstract what my needs might be into value-centric action. That is action that's guided by my values. Actions that are guided by, what's important to me, what gives my life meaning. And so that's the sandwich technique in a nutshell. And this is completely my own invention, but I'm gathering inputs that I'm receiving from a lot of areas, subject areas. I have an interest in psychology myself, and I have an interest in cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, motivational interviewing, and nonviolent communication. I have an interest in communicating, not only communicating with others, but communicating with self. I have an interest in empathy for others, and empathy and self-empathy. I also have an interest in communication. Anyway, so I'm gathering all these ideas, and I've come up with this idea of the sandwich technique, where I take the originally ridiculous ideas, completely ridiculous ideas that show up in my mind, and they show up in my mind continually. I've got habits of thought that continually blame and judge others. It's vacuous thinking. And I think that a lot of people get tripped up. They think that, particularly, maybe if they're super angry, they have a desire to, I don't know, to act out violence because they're getting these cues from these completely ridiculous thoughts. Suicidal people, they may think that their life is horrible and they want to end it. They want to end their own life. And that, of course, is a ridiculous thought. It's a thought that makes no sense. And so but that, of course, is the soggy layer of the bun, right? Don't take those thoughts seriously. That's not what those thoughts are for. Those thoughts are not designed to guide action. So this is my fatherly advice. Do not take those thoughts seriously. They are not, just because a thought occurs in your mind doesn't mean that you have to act on it. Just because a thought occurs in your mind doesn't mean it's accurate in any sense of the word, that it coheres with reality. In fact, quite often, because it's these thoughts are just are thrown out of our brain, they're just ejected from our brain habitually without much thinking. They, like I mentioned, are completely ridiculous and not consistent with reality, and do not cohere, say, in a one-to-one measure with reality. They're really just helpful hints that help us get to know what our needs are. Once we're able to identify our needs, wishes, desires, wants, then that's very valuable information. That's the nutrient, that's the nutritious information. Then we go from that to values-based behavior, right? Acting in ways that are consistent with our values. And that's the top of the bun of the sandwich technique. So I hope you learned something. The point of the sandwich metaphor is to not take those thoughts seriously. They happen to everyone. They happen routinely. And the people who follow those thoughts are people who engage in alcoholism and road rage and interpersonal violence and violence against themselves. It's the source of a lot of problems. People are duped. They think that because a thought happens that it coheres with reality, that there's some significance, that they have significance. But I am here to tell you that those thoughts are ridiculous. Okay. And don't pay attention to them. Pay attention to them only so much as they tell you what you need. And then once you know what your needs are, you can take effective values-based action. All right, that's my fatherly advice for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, Emily. Good night.